so you'll have it. And the way to get the way to use this code is you take it all, okay, and you copy it as the first line in your program. So even above the set screen. Now, typically you could put this in another file if you wanted to as well, and that's probably what you would do in the future. And then you could pull it from the file so that you don't have to look at it in your code. But it's going to tell us something. It's basically our own command, kind of like if we used any commands, like draw fill box is a command, right? Draw fill box is a command that takes in 5 numbers or 4 numbers and a color. Draw fill oval, same thing, 4 numbers and a color. These are commands, okay? But now we have a command called collision. So I'm going to write put, and then I'm going to write the word collision. And I don't really even need to know what all the code in collision does. It's just geometry. It checks the points between, basically checks like how close a circle and a square are together, and then if they're basically within the circle's radius, then it knows they're touching. Okay, so there's a whole bunch of weird code that goes along with that geometry. But here's what it takes in. It takes in the parameters x1, y1, x2, y2 for a rectangle. So it takes in the 4 positions you would give a rectangle. And then it takes in the 2 positions that you would give a circle and the radius of the circle. So it takes in actually 7 numbers. Okay? So let's give it a, oh, sorry, that's the wrong box. Let's give it the 7 numbers it needs. So if I run this, it'll say insufficient numbers printed or something. Missing parameters, yes. So it needs these 4 things for my rectangle. It always needs those first. Okay, so I'm just going to pass it all 4 numbers I would have made to make my box. And then it needs, I don't need to give it 2 radiuses. I only actually need to give it the 1. And then the next thing it needs is the 3 variables that go into a circle. Okay? So it needs 7 numbers, and the command that I've created is called collision. Okay? And it's going to put something on the screen. It's going to put a number on the screen. It's going to return the number 1 if they hit on the left or right edge. It's going to return a number 2 if they hit on the top or the bottom edge. It's going to return the number 3 if they hit at the corner first, and it's going to return number 0 if they don't hit at all, if they're not hitting. So I'm just going to put that on the screen constantly. Let's see what that does. Okay, so it says 0. That makes sense. Let's try to get it to hit the paddle. I'm only moving in one direction with my paddle now. Look, did you see that it fluttered over some numbers there? I actually got to add some code in here first to make sure my paddle moves left as well. Copy. Okay. So now I'm going to say A. Here's another shortcut. Minus equals 5. Okay. So now I can move it back and forth. Do you see how it's printing numbers when it's hitting? It actually knows when it's hitting, and it's telling me if it's hitting the top or bottom or the left or right. It's really good. Okay. So I actually have a command that knows if it's hitting or not. I just have to put it in an if statement instead of just printing it out. Okay? So I actually don't want to print it out here. I actually want to say if. So I'll just put if here. If that collision ever equals 2, okay, 2 I think is the top or the bottom. If it's hitting the top or the bottom, yes. If it's ever hitting the top or the bottom, I want to bounce it in the y direction. So I'm just going to write then, and the way to get it to bounce in the y direction is just to change the direction of the y step. Minus y step. And then I'll write end if. So now, this big long command that we've made, we don't even care how it works. That's the beauty of these commands. And in grade 11, we'll make our own. We don't. This one was just given to us. Okay? There's a lot of crazy code in there that we don't even care about. Oftentimes they're given to us in separate files, so we don't even have to see them. But if the collision is the number 2, then bounce it in the y direction. So let's see what happens. Yes, it knows it hits the paddle and tells it to bounce it in the y direction. So that's running. Okay. Now I could get a problem where I hit the side first and it gets trapped in the paddle because it thinks it's colliding. I'll have to deal with that in a little bit. But let's give it an else if. Okay, so let's copy this. And we will say else if. So I want to go else if like that. If the collision's ever 1, it says at the top what 1 means. It prints out 1 for a left-right collision. And 3 for a corner collision. Okay, so if it's 1, then I want to bounce it in the x direction. And if it's ever 3, I want to bounce it in both directions because it hit the corner. Okay, so I'm going to call this top collision. Top hit. Oop, that's not how you do a comment. %sign. Top hit. Side hit. You're not going to hit the side of the paddle too often, though. You might hit the corner more often. And then corner hit. Okay, great. So here we go. Look, hit the corner, bounced off. Hits the top, bounces off. Can I try to get it to hit the side? It's going to be a little bit tricky, but there it goes. Oh, that might be a corner hit as well. There's a side hit. So it actually knows it's not going to be perfect. I can still probably force the paddle and squeeze it into the ball and get it trapped and stuff. See that? It's on the right track for us that it is. Whoa, that was a weird one. The only way to get perfect collision is to add like physics equations and stuff, and we just don't really want to go there in this course. Okay, we have to learn about like energy, momentum, and speed, and acceleration, and velocity, and weird stuff like that. So for now, keep it real basic. We're just going to see. There we go. Bam, bam, bam. That's cool. Okay. So we now have some collision. Seems like it's off by like a touch. Maybe not. Okay, I'm happy with that. So yes, there's the if statement to make them hit. Pause the screen on that. Just make sure you copy all this collision code at the top of your code so you can use the command.